Hi everybody, Miss Habanero Pepper back with another book review. But before I do that, I would just like to do some real talk with you. I'm going to try to acknowledge September 11th, 2001 today, also better known as 9/11. It was a very traumatic experience in US history when the Twin Towers collapsed along with the World Trade Center, and an attack was actually staged on the White House and the Pentagon. A lot of people remember where they were and what they were doing on that day. And even though I didn't live for the event myself, since I was born after that year, my dad actually used to go to a library in the World Trade Center. And he actually left New York and went to Georgia a few days before this all happened. So sometimes I have to think if he had stayed that day, I wouldn't be here, and there were my sisters. So I'd like to start off with 30 seconds of silence to remember that moment. Thank you for acknowledging that moment of silence with me. And without further ado, I would like to start with the book review. This book is called The Map to Everywhere by Carrie Ryan and John Parker Davis. It's a fantasy book. I will actually have some news at the end regarding this month's review for books. And the story is really interesting. First, let me show you the cover, which is on my phone since I wasn't able to go to the library. Here it is. There we go. So as you can see, these are the two main characters, Finn over here, and this redhead is Morel. So I want you to close your eyes and imagine this world where pirate ships exist on this golden sea. It's called the Pirate Stream. It's literally known as a stream of possibility. Anything can happen. Everything can happen. If it branches off and creates an entirely new exotic world. Some of you might be thinking about a world with talking unicorns right now. Some of you might be thinking of a world that has a grove of talking trees, which actually does exist in the book. It's this crazy macabre world that could possibly be known as a cross between the world of Oz from The Wizard of Oz and Wonderland from Alice in Wonderland. Think of it as a mishmash of those plus a pirate story, which is pretty awesome. And the two main characters, Finn and Morel, they both start off the story by having their problems illustrated and described through the characters that they interact with. And then they eventually come together. Finn from the pirate stream and Morel from the real world, also known as Earth, where we live. And they go on this journey on the pirate stream to try and find a solution to their problems, interacting with a cast of unique, fantastically weird characters along the way. I would first like to start off by looking over the writing style of the authors, who, by the way, are married, which is adorable. The writing style is really great. It's suited for elementary schoolers to middle schoolers when eighth graders are just starting to get out of that fantasy, sci-fi, kiddie story, which, by the way, there's no such thing as a kiddie story. Books can be read at any age. And even though it can be easily understood by a fifth grader, I would say that the writing style has a really good way of having you empathize with the characters and what they're going through. Finn's situation is kind of sad, and instead of just telling you what his problem is, they actually put a scenario in the story when you first meet Finn that actually brings you through, oh, this is Finn, but he has a problem. And slowly but surely, you get to understand why it's so sad that his problem is what it is. So kudos to the authors for making us feel what the characters feel. I always love it when you do that. It's great. Next thing is the characters, which is where I can finally start going into more detail about the story. Let's first start off with the fantasy world part of the story, which is Finn. His full name is Finn N. Lanu, which actually can be stretched out into the acronym first name unknown, last name unknown. And there's a reason for that. The fun thing, or rather the sad thing really about Finn, is that he's forgettable. And not in that, oh, I haven't met that person for a few weeks, so I've kind of forgotten a few things about them now. I mean, he is literally forgettable. The second you take your eyes off him, you've forgotten him entirely. You've forgotten who he was, you've forgotten what he looked like, you even forgotten what he did. And on the pirate stream, there's this place called the Has Not Key. It's spelled really weird in the story, but they'll explain that to you. Finn is a thief. And he uses that ability to his advantage. The second somebody takes their eyes off him as he's doing the robbery and they try to come back, he goes, "Oh, you were looking for that person who robbed this store? I'm pretty sure they were a girl." Or, "Ooh, maybe their skin was actually a different color, or their hair was really, really curly. And they went off that way, or that way, or that way. Or, I don't know, they stole this airplane and they went off into the sky." So obviously, it's really advantageable. But the problem is, if nobody remembers you, you don't really have any relationships to have or maintain. You don't really have a family. And part of Finn's problem is because he's forgettable and nobody remembers him, nobody ever really cares about him when he goes off somewhere. There's nobody to come home to. So part of his problem is finding out why he's forgettable and how to fix it if he can. And while he's having this problem, we are then introduced to Marill, who lives in the real world, or Earth, as I said earlier. Marill is a really adventurous, courageous girl who's able to empathize with everybody that she meets. Her parents have this job that allows them to travel all around the world. And on their adventures, she's actually met a lot of exotic animals or animals that were in need of love and care and attention. She actually has a one-eyed cat, Cornelius, that she adopted. And one problem is that at the beginning of the story, even though we're introduced to Marill and how crazy her life can be, adventures and whatnot, it's noted that even though her family has a nomadic lifestyle, they've settled down roots because her mother is really, really sick, so they have to be close to a hospital. And Marill wants life to get back to the way that it used to be, because having to put down roots, she's had to enroll in school because she was usually homeschooled while her parents traveled around the world. And she's not really used to that lifestyle. She wants things to go back to how they used to be. So when the pirate stream miraculously crashes into the place where she lives, she goes onto the pirate stream to try and find the cure for her mother so things can get back to her version of normal. And that's when she meets Finn and the whole story really starts to begin. As you can see, the characters have their own elaborate backstories that actually fit into this world, which I'm able to appreciate. Because usually when you're trying to write a story, it's hard to actually have the characters fit into the world if you're just doing something that they're based off of. Like they're inspired by somebody else for an entirely different franchise, and then you're trying to build the world around that character, or you built the world first and then you're trying to build the characters in. But I think the authors did a really great job with that. And finally, last but not least, the world building. This crazy madcap world, there are actually illustrations to show you what the world looks like and how the characters fit into it. It's really beautiful. It's the kind of nostalgic thing that you'd see in, I don't know if any of the people viewing this have seen, but if you've heard of Studio Ghibli or if you've watched Disney, I imagine a lot of the viewers here have seen a Disney movie. It's a world that you can imagine and at the same time actually looks believable, and the way the characters interact with the world around them and all of the strange things that you hear about the world, it actually works together. You can imagine being in a Has Not Key with Finn and actually going into all the alleyways and turns and twists of this ramshackle apartment kind of world that had a port city, if you will. Port city. That's kind of what it's like, a ramshackle port city. It's really beautiful. And if you were to even see the illustrations, you would understand what I'm talking about. Everything works together. Even the writing goes along with the illustrations that are inside of the book. And finally, one last thing you can learn is the daily value of loyalty. As I noted earlier, Marill has this thing where she's able to take people and animals in who need love and care and need somebody who can hold on to them. The thing about Marill is throughout the entirety of the book, we learn she is the only one who remembers Finn. Even if she takes her eyes off him, she's the only one who remembers him, which means Finn is actually able to form a relationship, a friendship with Marill. Over the course of the series, they learn that they have to make sacrifices for each other, that they need to try to understand where the other person is coming from based on their history and their experiences. Parents, I'm reaching out to the parents now, not just to kids who might want to read this series. If you want a guideline to teach your children what a good relationship, a healthy relationship should be like, this is the best series to start having that talk with your kids. That's how good the series is. That's how good the writing is. It can actually teach them that value. So that's the book review. And the last thing, yes, this is the very, very last thing I wanted to tell you, is that to get out of the fantasy funk that I've been leading you on for a while now, this is going to be Sci-Fi September. I'm going to start off next Saturday with a sci-fi book, which I'm just letting you know right now before I actually post that video, will be more for high schoolers because it is a little explicit in some areas. Not everywhere, mind you, but there's 1 or 2 curse words. But it's a really interesting story. It's called Little Brother by Cory Doctorow. I will introduce that book to you later when I post the video, but I hope that kind of gets you a little bit interested for Sci-Fi September. So, bye! See you later!